How much is this nation worth fighting for?
D. James Kennedy Ministries presents Truths That Transform.
This week, we celebrated America's birthday. On Truths That Transform, we will consider whether this is still a nation worth fighting for, as we talk with Congressman Mike Johnson.
But spiritually, I think, even though it seems dark and the darkness seems to be encroaching, it's a great time for the church to be the church.
And we hear from a retired Air Force sergeant who has been forced to fight for his religious freedom in the courts.
I have never forfeited my rights to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or freedom of the press. Those are natural laws, and those are God's laws.
Join us on today's Truths That Transform.
This is Truths That Transform.
On the other hand, we in America,
When the city of Phoenix, something may be right. But God's design for education. Welcome to Truths That Transform, a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries, where we are standing for truth and defending your freedom. In this critical election year, it's vital that you be in the know. Our Impact newsletter gives you a biblical perspective on key national issues and what this ministry is doing about them. A very generous donor has stepped forward to make it possible for us to give you a 6-month trial subscription to Impact at no charge to you. To receive your subscription, simply call us toll-free at 877-962-7677 or go online to djkm.org. In America, religious freedom has come under assault as the forces of political correctness use every means at their disposal to punish Christian views. Later in this program, you'll meet an Air Force veteran who was prohibited from mentioning God in a flag ceremony and has been forced to fight for his religious freedom in the courts. And we'll share with you the truth about what makes America a nation worth defending. As we begin, Mike Johnson was an attorney with the Alliance Defending Freedom, one of our trusted ministry allies, who, by the way, just won a key victory at the Supreme Court in the case of a baker punished for exercising his religious conscience. Mike is an unapologetic Christian who is now fighting for freedom in the halls of Congress, representing Louisiana. I recently had a chance to talk with Congressman Johnson in Washington, D.C. We are living in extraordinary times when it comes to threats to personal freedom. Mm-hmm. The founders spoke mostly about freedom of conscience, and you could argue that the whole First Amendment rests upon freedom of conscience, and yet today it's under attack from almost every quarter. Do you see it that way?
Certainly do. My background before I got to Congress was in constitutional law. I worked for the Alliance Defending Freedom, and we defended religious freedom and the right of conscience in courts all around the country. And we've seen an increasing assault on that most fundamental freedom that we have. We call religious liberty our first freedom for a reason, of course, because it's listed first. And that's because the founders understood your right to believe and to act upon that belief is essential to who you are as an American, but even more fundamental than that, who you are as a human being. And so it's critically important to protect it, and yet we've seen this increasing assault over the last several decades, really. It's been growing.
You can see both sides of this. You've fought at the grassroots level and to the judicial process in defense of freedom. Mm-hmm. You're now sitting in Congress and are looking at the adoption of laws and agencies that oversee many aspects of our freedom are now subject to an unelected bureaucracy, the FCC, the Federal Election Commission, and so on. When we look objectively at members of Congress these days, it seems to me we see some great people, some really quality people, but many, even some who name the name of Christ, don't seem to possess a solid biblical world and life view. They don't seem to have a firm grasp, let alone mastery of the Constitution. They don't really even, I think in some cases, understand the political philosophy of the opponents that they face.
Exactly.
So I say all that to ask you this question. What kind of preparation should someone be seeking to undertake if they want to seek elected office and serve in the public policy arena?
That is an excellent question, and I think it's critical for us to be asking it and answering it right now. I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of good people in public office. There's some who get elected under a certain party label and aren't even sure really what that party's platform stands for, much less having a core and settled philosophy of government themselves. Right. So it's easy to change someone. You see people who have wildly inconsistent voting records, and you say, how could that be? Right. It's because they're influenced by whoever the loudest voice is on whatever issue there is. Exactly, because they don't have a true core philosophy that they're trying to defend and advance. You have people, even who are being elected to high office, who don't even understand the basic mechanics and the philosophy of our government. What is a constitutional republic? Why is this so important? Why has it been the most successful form of government on the planet? And by the way, it's still an experiment. We're only 240 years into this, right? We have to be able to articulate the reason for the hope that we have.
You didn't run for Congress, I'm guessing, because you thought there was no hope for America. Give us some hope. What's one thing that people might, if they understood better, might give them hope for what we see in the restoration of Republican, small r Republican form of government?
Well, people ask me all the time, what's the most surprising thing about being elected to Congress? And I would say that the most pleasant surprise has been some of the colleagues that are serving in the Congress. There's a growing number of true people who I would describe as constitutional conservatives and also committed Christians, believers who understand the importance of the spiritual aspect of what we're doing and why God has blessed our nation as He has. And to me, that's an encouraging thing. I think we are trending in the right direction. And you can make the argument for economic purposes or for foreign policy and all the rest. But spiritually, I think, even though it seems dark and the darkness seems to be encroaching, it's a great time for the church to be the church. And when we're encouraged to do that, we can make a lasting effect here and in eternity. And we see the results when we do, and that's what keeps us going.
Good. Well, thank you for your service to our nation.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely.
In this election year, it's vitally important that we have strong, capable Christians in positions of leadership. Mike Johnson is one such leader, and it's the goal of this ministry to train others like him. Indeed, Christian statesmanship was one of the values of our founder, Dr. D. James Kennedy. His daughter, Jennifer Kennedy Cassidy, joins me now. Jennifer, your dad knew better than most that we need Christian leaders.
Yes, he did, and I know that he thought that was a hallmark of the founding of this nation. And we are working to turn out Christian statesmen today, people who understand the Constitution, have a thoroughly biblical worldview, and are equipped with practical skills in negotiating, media relations, and more. We are providing that kind of rigorous training through our ongoing D. James Kennedy Center for Christian Leadership initiative in Washington, D.C., as we continue to fulfill my dad's vision. My friends, we are blessed to live in a nation where we get to choose our own leaders. And in these times, when America has strayed so far from its Christian roots and the unprecedented freedoms that came with them, we need to be reminded of that greatness and of the need to return to it. We must be reminded of the need to choose our leaders wisely, according to biblical principles. My father was an optimist, despite all the godlessness we see around us, because he knew the power of God to bring repentance, even to an entire country. And he knew that you and I have a role to play in that transformation. He never stopped believing, no matter how bad things got, that America and our freedoms remain worthy of all of our efforts to defend them. On this week in which we celebrate the nation's birth, my dad shares more from his important message, A Nation Worth Fighting For.
Imagine that the year was, say, 1939, and you were of draftable age. Your country was at war. You might very well be asking yourself the question, is this nation worth fighting for? Is it worth my dying for? Easy question to answer? Oh, I forgot. I forgot to mention that you live in Nazi Germany. Question just became a little harder to answer, I trust. We might ask ourselves the question, is this country worth fighting for? Or, for that matter, any? The more precious anything is, the more valuable, the more a person would be willing to pay for it. Well, let's look and see what we have and how valuable it is. If we go back 500 or so years to a time when the old world was growing old and older by the year, decay and despair were everywhere to be found, but unbeknownst to any of them, God had saved, God had reserved in the midst of two great oceans, the continent of America, for the latter times as the last great hope of mankind. I have not heard that ever mentioned about any other nation but this one, the last great hope of mankind. Just look at the physical attributes of what has been given to us by God. God has given to us this abundantly productive land which is virtually capable of feeding the whole world. Considering what we have been given, how much more should we be willing to return? And so, having reserved this land in the midst of the oceans, God at last prepared a people. Those valiant pioneers, the Pilgrims and the Puritans, came to establish that particular sort of land that God wanted it to be, a land where Jesus Christ was King and sovereign. As our founders said, we have this day, on July 4th, 1776, restored the sovereign, to whom be glory forever. The Pilgrims said that it was their hope that they would at least be a stepping stone to taking the gospel to all the nations of the world. Dear friend, that hope and prayer of theirs has been fulfilled. America has set out a stream of thousands upon thousands of missionaries and have reached actually every single nation on earth. I believe that Christians are going to have an impact on this country that hasn't been seen in 100 years before, and that decency and godliness are once again going to become normal in much of our land. I believe that is going to happen, and in that I rejoice. And to my mind, that most definitely makes this nation a land worth fighting for.
The gospel has the power to transform individuals as well as entire cultures. It was the foundation for those who settled this nation and for so many who founded our government. Perhaps that power is why so many are also threatened by it. Those who would press patently unbiblical ideas on our nation don't want any vestige of God to appear in public life. And often they will go to absurd lengths to push him out of the public square. Unfortunately, Air Force retiree Oscar Rodriguez Jr. found this out the hard way. Our own John Rabe has more.
In the 33 and a half years, I attained E8, which is only comprises of 2% of the entire population of the Air Force reaches to that grade E8.
Nearly 20 years into his Air Force service, Oscar Rodriguez Jr. joined the elite Air Force Honor Guard.
I heard someone do a flag folding speech, and I listened to it, and I enjoyed it, but it just seemed like it was missing something. So I talked to the superintendent of Honor Guard, and I told him, sir, could I take the script that we currently use and maybe modify it a little or change it a little? And he says, yeah, sure, why not? So I got the script, I took it home, and I looked at it and I started changing things in it. And the fundamental aspects of liberty is that man cannot govern himself. He has to be responsible to greater power, and that religion has to be part of our government. Yet this script said nothing of religion. So I put in the words God, not only once, but to really galvanize it for me, I put it in 6 times.
Our flag is known as the Stars and Stripes.
And I did it for retirement ceremonies. I did it for California State Fair. I did it for community events. I was known as a person that does the flag folding speech.
After Oscar Rodriguez retired, the Air Force adopted an official script for the flag folding ceremony, eliminating variants.
When Oscar was invited by somebody who had seen him do this speech at another event, that person personally approached Oscar.
Master Sergeant Chuck Roberson comes up to me and shakes my hand. He says, Oscar, it would be such an incredible honor if you could do this for me and my family.
And Oscar said, of course, it would be my privilege to do that.
When I was invited to this retirement ceremony, I was no longer part of the military. I was retired. I was a citizen just like anyone else.
Though it differed from the newly adopted official version, Oscar Rodriguez agreed as a private citizen to give his version of the flag folding speech, as his retiring friend had requested.
The commanding officer of that unit, when he heard that Oscar was going to be giving this speech, and a speech that, again, makes reference to the word God about 6 times, he said that's not an approved or an authorized Air Force speech. And he said he's not allowed to give that speech. And the retiree said, but it's my retirement. This is what I'm personally requesting. This is what I want for this is my special day. And so he told Oscar, I would like you to give that speech.
And the retirement went very well. Everything went according to plan. And then the flag comes out in a very ceremonious and solemn way. I get up, I take my position, and this gentleman, this airman, comes up to me and he says, are you really going to do this? Are you really going to do this? I was shocked. So as soon as I heard the cue, a certain note in the music, it was time for me to speak. And I launched off into that retirement script.
Our flag is known as the Stars and Stripes. A union consists of white stars.
And then additional airmen came, and they grabbed me, and they pulled me, and they pushed me out of that auditorium.
And together they stand united, indivisible.
These men had just betrayed me, had betrayed their oath, had betrayed the United States of America. Because regardless of the individual that I am, I have never forfeited my rights to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, or freedom of the press. Those are natural laws, and those are God's laws, and there's not one man that can take those rights away from me. And how dare they attempt to do such things?
A military commander has no authority over a civilian to say, you can't say the word God on this military base or during this retirement ceremony. We've demanded that the Air Force respond to this by apologizing, that they take action to ensure that this doesn't happen to anybody else ever again, and that they hold those who are responsible for this, they hold them accountable. Because no American, especially a decorated veteran like Oscar Rodriguez, should be manhandled like this and forced out of a retirement ceremony simply for giving a speech that has religious references in it.
The Air Force, however, has refused to simply apologize to Oscar Rodriguez and the retiree being honored in the flag ceremony. So they and their attorneys at First Liberty Institute have filed a federal lawsuit in U.S. District Court.
So when it comes to that flag, that's all I see. That's all I see, the images, thousands of images in my head of battles throughout different foreign lands, of people dying for our nation. So when I say that speech, that's what I think about. When I had that mission for Sergeant Roberson, that's who I'm thinking about. And do you think that 1 airman or 2 airmen or 3 airmen or the entire squadron is going to stop me when I'm thinking about those men that died for me? No, there was nothing that was going to stop me that day.
it is astounding that we could get to the place where an American civilian is hauled out of a government ceremony because he dared to mention God. This happened because of judicial tyranny, which is one of the greatest threats facing our nation, and something you need to know more about. We have developed a brand new resource to help you, and here's our own John Rabe to tell us more. John, judicial tyranny didn't just appear out of thin air recently, did it?
No, it really didn't. You'd have to go back probably to the 1940s to see what we are now experiencing. You had the Everson case, which the Supreme Court came along after 150 years plus of constitutional history, decided that there was a so-called separation of church and state, and that there could not be mentions of God in certain public functions. That's a complete perversion of the First Amendment, which was designed to protect religious speech. The Supreme Court took it and used it to drive religious speech out of the public square, and we're living with the consequences of that now. And that's why we've put together this new booklet, which we're offering in a 3-pack. It's the Truth in Action Q&A booklet called What is Judicial Tyranny? And it gets to this very question of what happens when judges begin to substitute their own policy preferences for the laws of the people and what's written in the Constitution.
I mean, it's really a question of usurpation, right? It's the Supreme Court taking unto itself an authority to import things into the Constitution that are not there.
That's exactly right. It is not for judges to make the law. The judges are to interpret and apply the law, and they should be interpreting and applying it according to the way it was written and the way it was clearly understood by the people who passed it.
So this booklet tells us about the problem. Does it give us any indication about what we can do to deal with it?
It does, and that's why I think it's important that people get the 3-pack of What is Judicial Tyranny, so that they can keep one and also share a couple with their friends so that their friends can understand this too. I can give you a hint about the solution. It involves November and it involves elections.
I agree. And we'll be happy to send you a 3-pack of this important new Truth in Action Q&A booklet, What is Judicial Tyranny?, as our thanks for your generous donation to the ongoing work of this ministry. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or go online to djkm.org. And John, appropriate for this resource, we have a companion resource to go with it that gives us an even clearer understanding of what the founders intended with respect to the Constitution. Tell us about that.
Well, Frank, of course, we celebrated our nation's birthday this past week on July 4th, and that's why this book is particularly appropriate as well. It's written by the president of Hillsdale College, an excellent school, Dr. Larry Arnn, and the book is called The Founder's Key, the Divine and Natural Connection Between the Declaration and the Constitution and What We Risk by Losing It. Part of this regime of judicial tyranny that we have seen has come from the fact that judges have separated the Constitution from the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence roots our rights in God, in our Creator. And when you separate the Constitution from that, you lose the basis for our rights, and so they become eroded, and that's exactly what we've seen happen in the courts. Dr. Arnn unfolds that beautifully in this very readable book, which also, by the way, includes the complete text of the Constitution, of the Declaration of Independence, and another number of other important historical documents.
And we will send you this outstanding book, The Founder's Key, by Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, along with a 3-pack of the Truth in Action Q&A booklets, What is Judicial Tyranny?, as our thanks for your generous donation of $40 or more to the ongoing work of this ministry. And when you give, you will also be helping us to train leaders through our groundbreaking D. James Kennedy Center for Christian Leadership Initiative in Washington, D.C. And the need has never been greater for godly Christian leaders. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or go online to djkm.org. In June, the United States Supreme Court issued a long-awaited ruling in the case of Jack Phillips, a Colorado baker who had been punished by the Colorado Civil Rights Commission for declining to bake a cake celebrating a same-sex wedding. The decision against Jack Phillips was upheld in the appeals courts until it reached the U.S. Supreme Court. But in something of a surprise, the High Court issued a ruling in favor of Jack Phillips by a decisive 7-2 vote, with two of the court's most liberal justices siding with the majority. That is very good news, at least as far as it goes. But we must remain vigilant because the court's decision was very limited in its scope. The justices decided that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission had violated the Constitution because they demonstrated an unvarnished hostility towards Christian doctrine and faith, when they are required to be neutral on it. The court rightly excoriated Colorado officials for this clear animus. But the justices left open the possibility that someone like Jack Phillips could still lose such a case with the same set of facts, as long as the commission wasn't openly hostile to his religious faith. This narrowly drawn decision doesn't really settle this matter. The First Amendment guarantees freedom from government interference in the free exercise of religion, period. And the fact that we must continue to wait for the Supreme Court to tell us whether our First Amendment rights still apply is emblematic of the judicial overreach that remains one of the greatest threats to a free people. A fact we will do well to remember come election time this November. D. James Kennedy Ministries is standing for truth and defending your freedom. I'm Frank Wright. I hope you'll join us next time when we present a special expose, Censoring the Truth, a program about the new media gatekeepers who are restricting the proclamation of the gospel. We'll see you then.
Next week on Truths That Transform.
I don't think the ultimate aim is to kill us. It is to get rid of us ideologically.
Their goal is to vilify us, to silence us, and to snuff us out. Or to quote the Southern Poverty Law Center, to destroy us.
And when Silicon Valley controls content and controls the standards, it's going to be even unconsciously biased to the left.
That's next week. Today's program is available on DVD for your gift to this ministry of any amount. Please call, write, or log on to our website today. This has been a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries.